In the feature segment today, a memory for some of us, a history lesson for others. After World War II, the so-called Cold War started between the United States and the Soviet Union, bringing both nations to the brink of Armageddon. In 1959, an unlikely diplomat used agriculture to achieve dialogue with the head of the Soviet Empire. Market to Market's Andrew Bott explains how Roswell Garst went toe-to-toe with Premier Nikita Khrushchev, hoping to find peace through corn.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. House number 1 as the blast hits it.
In the heart of the Cold War,
Tremendous glare of the fireball.
Americans lived in fear of nuclear annihilation. They were alarmed by a mounting Soviet threat and an uncertain regime led by Premier Nikita Khrushchev, the successor to brutal World War II-era dictator Joseph Stalin. But American apprehension was not universal. In the center of the U.S. Corn Belt, a leading businessman was laying the foundation for not only an American success story, but an international breakthrough. In the sleepy farm community of Coon Rapids, Iowa, corn farmer Roswell Garst built an agricultural powerhouse in the 1950s.
Next year, we trust you will join those thousands who know that the quality hybrid is the surest way to happy harvest.
Garst embraced technology early on in his quest for more efficient production practices and higher yields. The hard-nosed Iowa grain farmer set himself apart from his colleagues and earned a worldwide reputation. Garst's pursuit of international capitalism brought him to the doorstep of the world's most powerful communist nation, the Soviet Union. Years of correspondence formed an unlikely friendship between the American farmer and Soviet Premier Khrushchev. Their common bond was corn. Khrushchev's fascination with U.S. agriculture and an open invitation from a Des Moines Register newspaper editorial inspired the gregarious Soviet leader to personally visit America and its tall corn state in 1959.
Nobody among the American public would be wise to expect really sensational developments out of the conference between Eisenhower and Khrushchev at Camp David. Now that big plane is coming in. You can see it beautifully turning around. The premier of Soviet Russia slowly descending the steps, gesturing as he so often does. Here we are once more downtown in the vicinity of the route that will be traveled by the Russian premier. As you can see, there are very large crowds on hand around the Fort Des Moines there, but you can also see that there are some protest signs. There's one which reads, "The only good communist is a dead one."
If we will look at the Soviets, it was also find enough people who will say Khrushchev mustn't go to America, Americans are awful, the best American is a dead American.
Sergei Khrushchev, son of the late Soviet premier, joined his father on the historic 1959 delegation. Sergei remembers the elder Khrushchev's repeated attempts to demonstrate Soviet strength before and after his American visit.
Saying that we're producing missiles like sausages when we had 2 missiles, and I asked him, how you can say this? He told, I do not care how many missiles we have because it's important if we want to use them, but America have to know that we are strong.
But Khrushchev's chest-thumping diplomacy rung hollow in the field of agricultural technology. The Soviet premier knew his comrades were far behind their American farming counterparts. The Russian entourage paid visits to a nearby packing plant and the experimental farms at Iowa State University, where antibiotics were cutting-edge swine technology. With great fanfare, the Soviet delegation made the 80-mile trek from Des Moines to Coon Rapids, Iowa, and the farm of Roswell Garst. Under the watchful eyes and cameras of hundreds of journalists, Garst gave Khrushchev a no-nonsense tour of American farming practices.
That one-day event had, I think, a profound impact on Premier Khrushchev in terms of his capacity to understand the enormous productivity of American agriculture, and he compared that to what Russian and Soviet farmers were doing, and he realized that they were substantially behind us.
He was a man who kind of told it like it was, and apparently Khrushchev liked that. He admired people who were willing to sort of say their piece and stand up to him. I don't know if he admired them so much if they were from the Soviet Union.
I must say that you're a very wise and intelligent people in this part of the country, but we must also admit that God has helped you quite a bit.
That's right, he's on our side.
Он на нашей стороне, правильно. Семья хорошая? Нет, soil. Вы что, думаете, только вам Бог помогает, а нам не помогает? You mustn't think God is helping only you. Нам Он больше помогает. He's helping us too.
You tell him we have a saying in the United States, he likes to quote saying, the Lord helps those who help themselves.
He asked Mr. Garst, how many people working on your farm? And he told me and my sons. And he asked, how many sons you have? He told 4, and they are as strong as I am. And my father looked at them and told, in our collective farm it will be at least 60 people need to work on this.
The plain-speaking farmer and the Russian leader made worldwide headlines tromping through the Iowa countryside, pushing aside droves of reporters in their path. At one point, Garst famously threw silage at a photographer.
He wanted to show Khrushchev how to raise corn and feed it to cattle. That's what he wanted to do. And he found the press and the attention a huge bother. He was really on the mission of helping Khrushchev grow food. I think Khrushchev thought it was okay. He brought along his own press corps to this event because we think his real motive to come here was to convince his own people that it was okay to look at Western technology.
Liz Garst, granddaughter of Roswell, was a young girl on that fateful September day in 1959. 50 years later, Liz and members of the Garst family invited a Russian delegation back to Coon Rapids in a celebration of citizen diplomacy. Sergei Khrushchev, now an American citizen and Brown University professor, was part of the Russian entourage that included a full agricultural delegation. The Garst farmhouse, now a bed and breakfast on the sprawling White Rock Conservancy, was the site for remembrance and reflection amongst a new generation of Americans and Russians.
The meaning of that visit will become more and more important.
50 years in agricultural progress was clearly evident as the Russian leaders toured an Iowa ethanol plant, stood in awe of 30-plus row planters.
And this kind of farm equipment will not be affordable to them.
And feasted on, what else, but Iowa sweet corn. The technological and economic gap between American and Russian agriculture is still present in 2009. But back at the Garst farm, the picture of a long-thawed Cold War appears prominently as the visit's defining image. After Nikita Khrushchev's visit 50 years ago, the Soviet leader overextended his country on corn planting, an experiment that ultimately failed and contributed to his ouster in the mid-1960s. Garst's diplomatic legacy would later be carried on by his nephew, John Crystal, and Russian agricultural leader Viktor Lyshenko. The Garst seed brand, long championed in the heart of the Corn Belt, was ultimately purchased by the Syngenta Corporation. And the town of Coon Rapids still claims Roswell Garst as its most famous citizen.
I thought that he was a great person because he was the person who first, or one of the first, drilled a hole in the Iron Curtain from the American side.
It was an agricultural story above all else. How cool that the first interaction between mortal enemies was on coming together on how to eat. That's a great, wonderful story.
They thought about corn as the most promising kind of grain, and this is so. If now world produce roughly 2 billion tons of grains, different grains, 1/3 of this is corn. That means they knew what they have been doing. They've been right in their prognosis.
While the passage of time has dimmed the memory of Garst and Khrushchev's historic visit, the lessons of agricultural diplomacy and what Garst called peace through corn are readily apparent half a century later.
Roughly 5% of America's farmers produce 75% of our food and fiber. And they do that because they use science, they use technology, which I think is another important lesson that we seem to have carried over for the last 50 years.